The Positive Pause is a motivational-minded podcast covering topics women want to know about as they journey to and through menopause, focusing on subjects that impact women's health and healthy aging, including what it means to age healthfully. The Positive Pause features experts and influencers from a variety of industries and specialties. The information and opinions expressed on the Positive Pause are not intended to replace the services of trained professionals or to provide specific medical advice. To see the National Menopause Foundation's full medical disclaimer, please visit nationalmenopausefoundation.org.
Hello, and welcome to The Positive Pause. My name is Claire Gill. I'm the founder of the National Menopause Foundation. My guest on this episode of The Positive Pause is Robin Gorman Newman, founder of Motherhood Later Than Sooner. When Robin became a later-in-life mom at 42, she realized there weren't any groups or resources tailored to women who become moms later than the average age. So she did the logical thing. She created one. An ardent theater lover and promotional consultant, Robin is also founder of RGN Theatrical, associate producer of Motherhood Out Loud, that had a successful off-Broadway run at primary stages in New York City and is being performed worldwide. She is a Tony-nominated producer, love coach, author, blogger, and PR and marketing expert. It's my pleasure to speak with her about how motherhood, later than sooner, can impact how we experience menopause, too. Thank you for joining me this morning, Robin. It's great to talk with you about this really interesting topic. And as we've kind of shared, I'm definitely in your target audience, as I too had a baby over 40, my one and only baby over 40. So it's exciting to talk with someone who knows all about this and who is so connected to other women who are also going through motherhood later rather than sooner. So let's talk a little bit about when you decided to launch Motherhood Later Than Sooner and what led you to start the organization.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. And yes, it has become really quite commonplace to become a mom later in life. But as common as it is, when you're out there in the trenches doing it, it can feel very alone. And that's exactly why I launched Motherhood Later Than Sooner. Our website is motherhoodlater.com, because I'm in New York. And when I became a mom and my husband and I became parents via adoption, and I had really never thought about age until that point. I had lost my mom, unfortunately. So she never got to see me become a mom. Oh. But, and many of my friends were, either had kids earlier or we're still single and, not going to have kids. Right. So I didn't have a village, so to speak. And right. I never really, a parenting village, that is. And I hadn't thought about that because I've always been resourceful. I've always been kind of type A, tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. But this wasn't about needing instruction. This was about needing camaraderie. This right. was, wanting other moms to talk to and to share, and especially if anyone had an adoption experience, because that's a whole other realm. Right. And I had a really big aha moment. I was doing a Mommy and Me program with my son, and he was very young. And the kids are playing, and the moms were off to the side, and a conversation was being led by a social worker. And I thought I would connect and make friends, and he would play, and it felt like this total win-win. And it was a weekly thing. And after a few weeks of being in this program, there was one particular mom, but in general, I became aware that I was potentially the oldest one in the group. And not that I cared, except this one mom, her constant dialogue was, my mother shops too much for my kids. And after hearing it repetitively, I got up on a soapbox and I whipped out one of my business cards, and not promoting myself, but just for effect purposes. And I said to her, here's my business card. You can give it to your mom. She can shop from me anytime, because you know what? If she wasn't here, you would miss her.
That's right.
And afterwards, she came over and thanked me. And clearly it was a big aha for her. But it was even bigger for me because it made me realize I'm not going to make friends doing that. Right. And perhaps this group is not going to meet those needs. And perhaps there is a difference in being a mother later in life, and you have lived longer, and maybe you don't sweat the small stuff and all that. Maybe you're doing the sandwich generation. And I know we'll talk more about those subjects. But that was what led me to launch Motherhood Later, because I essentially said, where are they? I know they're out there, but how do I find them? And I was frankly surprised that there wasn't something a little more organized or even on the web that I could tap into. So I launched it initially in New York. We weren't even on the web at that point. I just put it out there because I have a background in PR. So I'm able to do that. There was an immediate response, and we would get together, just the moms initially, to share. And then it segued from that into mommy and me outings, to moms lunches and dinners with speakers and all kinds of different events. And then a gal, Eliza Sherman Risdale, who I knew from New York ages ago professionally, had since moved and was now living in Alaska. And we had reconnected recently via the web. And unbeknownst to me, she was now married with a child, and we were catching up. And she said to me, "So what are you up to?" And I said, "Well, I launched this organization and I'm a mom now." And she said, "Oh my God, so am I. And I'm over 40 and I need that." And she launched what became our second chapter in Anchorage, Alaska.
That's great.
And because of her tech background, then she also created our first website, which was motherhoodlater.com. And it's since been revamped. But once you get on the web, of course, as everyone knows, people find you.
Right.
And now we have in-person chapters literally all over the world. We recently launched one in Nigeria. And we're on Facebook actively in 2 groups, and we have all kinds of activity on the website itself. We feature later moms and dads. We have a blog by later moms, experts, and authors. And we're now actually doing a weekly Zoom podcast support group for later moms, and dads are welcome to share. And we're planning a speaker series also. We're in discussion with various authors to bring them in and to sort of enlighten moms on subjects regarding parenthood, but also more, what do women over 40 need and crave, especially these days with all the challenges that we're facing.
Right. Unprecedented times. But it is interesting. Like you said, I think we actually, despite not being able to find each other, as was your experience in New York kind of stuff when you first started, we still have it so much easier than women before us who didn't have the internet to try to find these things. But I think sometimes we need to be reminded to look for these things. Like I said, I did not know that your organization existed. And, again, being at that exact demographic, that's sort of, oh God, here I am. And all the other moms are in their 20s and 30s. What are we going to have in common? How will I fit in with that? It really was interesting then to find your website and see there's so many women doing. I mean, interestingly enough, I did see that, births among women ages 40 to 44 have been rising steadily since the early 80s. So there's definitely more of us out there, but it's still a smaller, obviously, number than those who have their children in their 20s and 30s. But it is great to be able to connect with women and say, this is what I'm experiencing. And, what are other women experiencing? I think part of it is too, just to realize we're not alone, as you said, that, there's other people going through the exact same things. And it's nice to have that village, as you said. So it's terrific to have the organization.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I mean, it's been interesting to me because sometimes I feel like a mom pen pal service almost because I get inquiries from women who aren't even moms yet, but they're of a certain age and they might or might not, be engaged or married. Sometimes they're trying, like they might be doing fertility, or I hear from women who are in the throes of trying to adopt and they have questions. But then I've also heard from women who don't even know, when and if they will get married, exactly when they'll have a child, but they know that whenever they do, they're going to fit this demographic. And they're just happy to know that we exist. Sometimes they want to speak with some of the moms in my group just to know what the experience was like. So it's been interesting because it's not just reaching those who are doing it, it's those who aspire to do it.
Yeah, that's true. That's right. What a great lesson, right? And be able to talk to people through it before you make that major life-changing decision, for so many, like you said, whether, via natural or adoption, there's so much that goes into it. But so again, and I think, we say it's all rosy most of the time, and certainly it's an amazing experience, motherhood at any age and in any way. But what are some of the challenges that you found that later moms share?
Well, definitely hormones, depending on how old you are and depending on the age of your child, you could both be having, hormone spurts or a lack of at the same time. So it's definitely challenging doing the perimenopause or menopause thing when your child is growing as well, because you never know who's going to show up that day. So
that's right.
So that is definitely, and we talk a lot about hormones and, some of the chatter that we have going on. So that's definitely part of it. That for me, honestly, I think has probably been one of the biggest challenges. The other thing I would say is just living the sandwich generation. And that was very tough. And my parents have now passed, unfortunately. But and my mom had passed, as I said before, I became a mom, but my dad was still around. He was a senior. And then he later had health issues. And it was very challenging navigating his care along with raising a young son.
Right.
At that time. It really, it took a lot out of me emotionally and physically.
Yeah.
So that's one of the biggest things I would say, in addition to the hormone thing.
Yeah. We had that experience as well. My mom lived until she was 90 and passed just a couple of years ago, but she lived with my sister and her husband and their daughter their entire married life. And it ended up being, 15 years that when she moved in with them. And like you said, raising an infant and then dealing with an older parent in the house is just, I think, an experience that most people don't recognize as, how challenging that can be, and then when you talk about, again, what we're going through with our own bodies and our own changes, that kind of stuff. So I've said a million times that my sister and my brother-in-law are saints and all good karma should come to them. And it's, as much as I helped out and my brother helped out, it's not the same as having the parent actually living with you and being in charge of all of their care and stuff. So it takes a special kind of person. So I can see that.
Yeah.
So what are some of the positives then that you found that women talk about of being an older mom?
I see a lot of positives. Firstly, later in life moms are some of the most grateful women I know, because chances are if someone became a later in life mom, there's probably a reason for it. Whether they had fertility challenges or whether it took a while to meet their mate and they weren't sure if they wanted to parent as a single person, or perhaps they were building their career and that was really important to them. And that's a great thing to be able to role model for a child as well, to have a career that feels good to you. So I think gratitude, first of all, is one of the things that really impresses me about later in life moms. And the other things are that you have lived longer. And there's a lot to be said for that, because with that comes wisdom. With that comes, more life experience. With that comes, if you had any sort of career and hopefully it felt good and maybe you're still working, or maybe you've refashioned that and now you're working from home or part-time, but whatever you're doing, you might have had professional years behind you or still ahead of you that you embrace. And again, to model that for a child, it's so important to be happy within yourself before you become a parent and during, of course, because for me, I've always worked, I used to be a vice president at a PR firm, and now I'm a theater producer, and I work from home now largely. And I'm so grateful that I do, because my son sees what I do. He sees that I'm happy with what I do. And if I'd become a mom earlier, I wouldn't have had the years behind me to have that chance to cultivate my endeavors and to craft the resume that I now have. And for me, that's important. That's not important for everyone. And that's not to slight any mom who does not work and is a full-time mom and is just devoted to her kids. And, at the end of the day, it's what you want and it's what you need and what feels good to you. And I think regardless of what you choose to do, when you do become a mom later in life, you hopefully are more self-aware.
That's true. I think the same thing, good modeling. I found that the same too. I think when I was pregnant, my office did a kind of a video series with the parents in the office sharing their best tips. And one of them from a male colleague was patience. Infinite amounts of patience is the one thing that you need. And I've noted that is absolutely true. And I've often thought, wow, had I been younger, I would not have had the patience that I have now, as an older mom. And so that is a really great tip and the benefit of it, as you said, and I think because we talk about, again, different generational things, my mom actually became a mom in her 40s. And That was, 50 years ago, and it was unheard of, it was definitely a stigma around it back then. For sure, she shared with us how she kind of kept it hidden, and I didn't really even know how old my mom was until I was a teenager, because she told everybody she was 10 years younger so that she would fit in with my friends' moms. Do you think that's still the case? Do you think there's still some kind of judgment around being an older mom, or have we gotten past that?
I do think there's judgment. I don't know that it needs to be the extent of someone feeling like they have to hide it. I think if someone chooses to say they're 10 years younger, it's just because they want to be 10 years younger.
Right.
And who doesn't? We'd all love to be, possibly, depending where you're at in your life. But I absolutely think there's judgment and that was also one of the aha moments for me, again, when my son was young, but not quite as young as when I had started motherhood later. It was maybe 3 or 4 years after I actually had launched it, but it just kind of reaffirmed to me why this is so needed. I had a scenario where I was in the local diner with my son and we were doing the potty training thing. So he was maybe around 3-ish or so. Mm-hmm. And so I took him into the ladies' room with me and we were on our way out. And on the way out, and this was like my hangout, feel good local place, some woman walks into the restroom as I'm exiting and just looks at me and him and says to me, no greeting, and says, "So are you the mom or the grandmom?"
Yeah.
And I had no clue how to answer that. I did not. I usually don't lack for words. And in that moment I did. And I sort of shot myself a glance in the mirror of the restroom. And I thought, oh my God. And I wasn't gray. And I thought, wow, like, what is she seeing that I'm not seeing? And I was in my 40s then. So I'm like, okay, I don't get it. And then I thought, okay, what would have been a good answer to that? And since I didn't know what to say, I basically said to her, well, I'm not going to answer that. And I walked out the door.
That's interesting.
And then I thought, okay, what's that?
I said, that's interesting that you just didn't answer and moved on. So has it happened since? What do you say?
Well, no, but I think what bothered me in that moment was, where would that conversation have gone? If I had said, well, I'm the mom, then she would have said what? And if I said I was the grandmom, then she would have said what? So, clearly, I guess she had some agenda. I don't know what it was about for her, but it just felt like a very in-your-face, unwarranted question. And in that moment, I did feel judgment.
Yeah.
And,
but I think
other women have had, similar experiences that I've heard through conversation in motherhood later. And it's unfortunate because my viewpoint toward that is that it's a personal choice.
That's right.
And people have asked me also, do you think that it's sometimes unfair almost if someone becomes a mom later in life because they're older and maybe they won't live so long? And my response to that is, and sadly, and we're seeing this now more than ever, sickness knows no age. So,
the actual truth, though, to it is all these recent studies have shown that women who have children over the age of 40 actually live longer than other women. And there's been numerous studies about this. And the other benefit is actually that cognitively, women who have children over the age of 40 have less dementia and less issues with cognitive decline than younger women and moms. So we can put that back on them, because you're right. That was sort of the assumption that, women are having children older and they're not going to live longer. Yep. Turns out it keeps us alive longer. So we have a better chance of reaching 95 than 20-year-olds do.
I like that. Yeah.
So good to know stuff. But I agree. I had the first time I had the are you the grandma question with my daughter, who's almost 9. I just responded. I said, "No, Mom." And then there was nothing. It was just like, "Oh, she's beautiful," blah blah blah, and they just kind of went on about it. So like you said, what was the purpose of asking the question? I don't know, but I said to my husband when I came home, I was like, "So I got the question." I knew it was coming because I remember people asking my dad that, and I said, and it hurt it hurt as bad as I thought it would. And then got over it. But I think what was important for me was to make it not a big deal for my daughter. So she heard and she said, "What did she ask you?" And I said, "Oh, she asked me if I was your grandma or your mom." So I told her I was your mom. And she was like, "Oh, okay." And so I want that to be, again, the way we react, I think, is how we kind of help educate people about the fact that, yeah, this is pretty normal these days. And, again, like you said, in some places, it's none of your business. But,
Right.
too, as an adoptive mom, people ask this kind of things. I have so many friends who've adopted, and they said, the questions that come from people, it's really amazing, where it's like, why do you think it's your business to ask? And if you see a woman with a child of a different race, yeah, good chance she adopted. So why bother asking the question, I have a lot of biracial friends, biracial family friends that have the same thing, where it's sort of like the child doesn't look like a parent. So people think it's okay to ask where the child comes from. Seriously. So we all have to work a little bit better on our kindness and our personal questions to people. But sometimes I think it's just a natural curiosity. So we just kind of have to roll with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really in that moment because I was caught off guard.
The first time's really hard.
Yeah, well, and I still think people need to filter. And I think that, I don't think that we should walk around feeling self-conscious. And I can't say that I did, but I do think that, my experience has been that once you become a mom, whether it's a later in life mom or any mom, that there have been times when I often felt like it almost gives it like an open season, a license to strangers to give you parenting advice, or to ask parenting questions.
But it happens to every generation, right? Because, young married couples where they get the question right away. So when are you having kids? And what if they decided not to have kids? Like you said, we all need to do a better job of filtering and kind of being respectful of people's decisions and life choices and stuff. Let's talk about more of the good stuff about your organization. And you mentioned how it's growing and there's chapters and even international chapters. So if someone goes to your website, what can they expect from joining a chapter or being a participant on the web discussions, et cetera?
Sure. Well, right now everything is, online focused because of current circumstances, but pre-pandemic, we do have in-person chapters, and they still exist. And we don't have one in every single town everywhere. But if someone is interested, the website does list the current chapters that we have. And the two newest ones are Lagos, Nigeria, and Houston, Texas. And we have a very active chapter in LA. Certainly New York is the largest and very active in New York. And so you would go to the website and check out where the chapters are. And if you have interest, great, drop me a note and I'm happy to connect you with the chapter head. And if you live in a town where there is not a chapter, then we're happy to work with you to launch one. There is no fee to launch one. And we help support that effort. And essentially you would then plan events and get-togethers when it's safe to do that, fit your needs and the needs of other moms that you'd like to meet in your community. And we have we have two groups on Facebook. One is a public community, one is a private group. And the private group has now almost 900 members in it.
Wow.
From all over the world. And there's a very active dialogue and conversation there. And we invite moms to join us there and to share about themselves and to post questions. And it's a really great, supportive, positive place. So that's a great outlet. And then we have a blog on my website written by other parents. We love stories from later moms and dads. If anyone is interested in writing for us, we'd love to hear from them. We also welcome contributions by authors and experts on subjects, not just parenting related, but of anything really of interest to a woman over 40. We don't get heavy into health. Although we are going to touch on menopause because we talk a lot about hormones.
Well, that's good. I appreciate that part for sure.
Yeah. But other than the hormone thing, we don't get heavy into health. We touch on sleep, but, not that much else in the health arena. And now we're doing a lot of virtual stuff. We're doing these Zoom chats. We're looking to launch another Zoom chat group. So we'd love to hear from any later moms interested in that. And we're going to be launching a series actually in early August featuring authors and experts of books that we think would resonate with this audience as well. And there'll be some giveaways connected with that. So if somebody wants to get in our database and hear about all this, they can write to me at Robin, ROBIN, at motherhoodlater, LATER.com.
Right.
And we're looking to address different subjects like adoption and special parenting, special needs child. And we really want to bring in some some hardcore subjects where those of us have been through certain experiences that we can share and to really try to help others. And that's the goal at the end of the day is, how can we support each other? And it takes a village.
That's what I love about it. And really, in the same thing, again, we're so akin in that way where I've, realized there was nothing out there for women at menopause really to come together as a community and get information, but share with one another. There's a lot of clinical information. There's a lot of that type of information out there, being told what we need to know and what we should do. But it's sometimes just having that peer-to-peer support is so critical. So let's talk a little bit about that, about menopause and stuff. Do you have any advice for moms who are parenting children while going through perimenopause and menopause?
Wow. Well, just as you said about Motherhood Leader, if you wish you'd known about us, I wish I knew about you. I had a really challenging perimenopause ride and, did not recognize a lot of the symptoms. And thankfully, I have an integrative doctor who was hugely supportive and of course, I was seeing my gynecologist too, but I really needed more than that.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate to have somebody who got it, and understood, because otherwise, if I'd gone to my regular doctor, there were times when I felt like he might have had me committed because I had so many symptoms that to me sounded crazy. So I could only imagine how they would sound to someone else who isn't really, perhaps as up on all the things that might seem out of the box, when you're going through it. So what I would advise women is to, seek out alternative care, potentially if you're regular gynecologist or whoever you see, if, you're not getting the answers or if you just need more information. I'm very holistically and alternative minded. So I'm always open to any other approach, in that way as well, anything that can help. And I think just share. I mean, now, Facebook is so great because they have groups for everything. And I didn't really dive in heavily on Facebook group-wise when I was going through all the perimenopause stuff. But, I'm sure there's some amazing supports there and they should reach out to your organization. And, just know that just as with later motherhood, you're not alone. With perimenopause and menopause challenges, you're not alone either. And don't be shy about it. And if you have questions and need help, just find your tribe.
That's right. That's great. That's great advice. You're right. I think, the one concern I had when I was starting the Menopause Foundation, the National Menopause Foundation, was, I feel that where I live and the group of women that I have in my life, we talk about it a lot, right? And there is a great support system and there are options, right? So if I'm not getting what I need from my, the healthcare provider, I can find another one, because we live in a big city and there's plenty of options and stuff. But I worry then for, my colleagues and friends who are, and even strangers who are, in maybe smaller communities or rural where there's one doctor, right? And so it's not like you're going to switch up because he or she is not giving you what you want. So it is, like you said, it's really important to find and to utilize what we have now with Facebook and with online support and stuff to be able to reach out and get more information for those who need it. And to find out, like you said, you're not crazy, that this really does happen to us and lots of women going through it. And even sometimes just knowing, oh, wow, other women are going through that too. Okay, great. Might make us, either one, find another way to deal with whatever the symptom of menopause might be, but also just knowing that, that everything's normal, that this is a normal part of life and you are going to continue through it. And we're lucky enough to live long enough to get to menopausal age. We should celebrate that and then move forward for it. So that's terrific.
And I would also add to, I'm sorry?
No, I was just saying, and then parenting children through it is that extra challenge. So it's nice to know again that there's resources like your organization out there to help women as they do that as well.
Yeah. And the other thing I was just going to say is that, and because you mentioned someone might not have access to other alternative practitioners where they are. And, there are doctors, especially these days, who are doing telehealth.
That's right.
So, and for something like hormones, you could speak to a doctor in New York, for example. You wouldn't have to do an exam because you have your gynecologist for that.
That's right.
And you could have blood work done either by your gynecologist or, a telehealth practitioner can order blood work, because it's really more blood work that becomes a big part of the conversation.
That's right.
And then, go from there. So there are
but
choices
you need to know that,
you don't
right?
have to. Right. Well, that's why I'm sharing it right now, because you don't have to be limited to medical practitioners where you live.
Yeah. I remember when I was first starting the organization, I had that conversation with some women at an office where I was getting my mail, and they were sort of questioning, oh, I think I'm in, perimenopause or whatever. I'm like, you can have blood work done, right? That will help, help your doctor inform. And they were like, no, I didn't know that. So it's like, there's so much that we don't even know. So again, like you said, having these resources. And I hope too that telemedicine is here to stay. I think obviously it became incredibly important for the COVID-19 crisis that, people who had risk factors that they shouldn't be going out were able to kind of continue their medical care via telehealth. But there are some terrific benefits to it. So let's hope that continues moving forward. Well, we've covered a lot of ground, and I really appreciate all of your time you've given today. Is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know that we might not have covered yet? And you want to give the website address again? I'll also make sure that it's included in the notes for the podcast when we publish. But what else? Is there anything else you need to share?
Well, the website is motherhoodlater, later.com. And again, we have 2 Facebook groups, so join us there. We also were on Twitter as well at motherhoodlater. And I would just love to leave women, if you haven't become a later in life mom, because I get asked this question a lot too, is, what does it feel like? Or do you recommend it? Or how do you know if you should? Or how do you know if you should have more? Even that comes up a lot from later moms. And what I always say to people is trust your gut. There's no one can tell you what to do. And if you're not sure what feels right, then get quiet. I'm a meditation fan. And see what comes up for you. And of course, discuss it with your partner if you have a partner, and make sure that you're on the same page. And if you don't have a partner, then just see what comes up for you. And also, if you don't have a partner, see what sort of support you might need and give that some advanced thought as well. But I would say go for it if it's something that feels important and it's on your radar, because of all the later in life moms that I know, and I know many, there isn't one who has ever said to me, oh, gee, I'm sorry I did this.
Right.
They're all in love with their kids. They're all, I would venture to say, most of them, if not all, would say it's the best decision they made. Don't let anyone pressure you to feel like you need to have more than one. I have one, and I can vouch for the fact that he is not lonely. He has a full life. He's happy. I have many friends who don't have siblings. And they are actually happier than some of the people who I know who have siblings that, may or may not have a challenging relationship with their sibling. So your kids will be fine, even if they're only one. And, find your village, find your people, find, reach out to a motherhood later or whoever you can to have that camaraderie and the ear of peers. Because it does make a difference. Yeah. So I would say go for it if it's meaningful to you.
That's terrific. That's a great way to end. That's a positive note. I love that. Thank you, Robin, so much. Thank you for your time.
Sure.
Thank you for starting this organization and bringing women together like that around such an important topic. And I look forward to participating, and I'm sure many of our listeners will as well. And thanks again for all you do.
No, you're very welcome. And thank you to you, because menopause is a hot button. So I think it's wonderful, the support that you offer too.
Terrific. Thanks. Thanks again to Robin for sharing her incredible story. Please be sure to visit motherhoodlater.com to see all the wonderful resources Robin has available and to connect with other moms who became mothers later rather than sooner. We hope you'll join us for our next episode of The Positive Pause.